Welcome to Blue Marble Defender story number 22. It's titled Dirtball. A question was asked, and Rookie replied, "Sure, I'll tell you what happened that day with Minn, but I have lots more homework these days, so I'll keep the story short, okay?" Chapter 1. The First Game. He disappeared for a moment and returned with a bag more than 2 meters long. It looked like a bag for a 6-person camping tent, and it appeared to be quite heavy. He dropped it on the ground, pulled a string to open it, pushed the empty bag away, touched it somewhere with both hands, and in a flurry of spokes jumping around and clacking together, it formed itself into a silver geodesic dome about 3 meters high and about 5 meters in diameter. It was amazing. The empty plain grass now hosted an impressive structure. I pushed on the side and found it was very solid. The spokes were made of some light material like aluminum, and when I pushed on the dome panels, they felt as substantial as the side of our house. Minn said there were 36 panels, but I could see that one was missing and served as a door. I got down on my hands and knees, looked in, and found it also had a floor. It too was made of triangular panels, but they were dark gray. I tapped, and they seemed as hard as a gymnasium's basketball court. Minn disappeared, returned with another sack, pointed to the dome's opening, and said, "Crawl in and prepare to be destroyed in your first game of Dirtball. I built this dome and the equipment, and I invented the game, so I'm a pro at it." Well, he followed me in. He opened the sack and pulled out 4 softball-sized light tan balls. Each was attached to a 3-meter tether made from some lightweight fabric. 2 were yellow and 2 were blue. He said, "You're wearing a blue shirt, so take the ones with blue tethers and get a feel for the balls." I did, and one was slightly sticky and soft, while the other was smooth and hard. He then said, "Now watch me." He threaded his hand through the tether loop of his sticky ball and tossed it toward the triangular panel in front of him labeled 1. It stuck there, and after about 3 seconds, the panel turned green. He said, "After the panel gives you the green signal, you can pull it off and go on to the next panel." He threaded his right hand through the smooth ball's tether loop and said, "This ball can be used to knock your opponent's ball off before his panel turns green. These balls are your tools. The game is always for 2 people. One starts at panel number 35 and finishes at panel 1, and the other, of course, starts at 1 and ends at 35. You must turn all panels green in sequence. The sticky ball needs to stay attached for 3 seconds before the panel turns green. If the ball falls off, or if your opponent knocks it off, you have to do it again to proceed." Then he threw the hard ball overhand at the sticky one attached to panel 1 and knocked it off, saying, Since the panel had already turned green, being knocked off didn't matter, and my opponent could proceed to the next panel." He pulled the sticky ball back with its tether and said, "Watch this as live action." He again tossed with his left hand, and his ball stuck on panel 1, but he immediately threw the hard ball, hit the sticky one, and knocked it off. The panel briefly flashed red. Minn said, "Most players run through the 35 panels as fast as they can and only take aim at their opponent's sticky ball when they're close and he presents an easy opportunity. Got it?" I nodded, and he continued. "Slide your hands close to into those blue tethers and practice on the first few panels. If you hit the right panel in sequence, you can pull the sticky ball off after the 3 seconds it takes to turn green. If you hit the wrong panel, the ball sticks for 5 seconds before it lets itself be pulled off. 5 seconds may not seem like much in theory, but it feels like an eternity during a game. It really slows you down." All right, so I went forward. I had no problem with panel 1, but when I wanted to move to the next one, I realized the panels were numbered randomly, and I wasted a lot of time searching for the second one. I had to look all around the dome. I finally found it way up high on the top of the dome. My first left-handed toss didn't go high enough. Listen to this. The ball plopped down on my head, stuck to my hair. It was no fun getting it off. My next throw went high enough, but it hit the wrong panel. It stayed there for 5 seconds till I pulled it off. I was clearly a rank amateur, and I had a lot to learn. But determined to stay upbeat, I said, "Nice that you found a way to make the ball stick to the wall in anything except your hand." I kept practicing and came to realize my left-handed tosses work best underhand. I finally got the hang of it. Practiced throwing the hard ball and always used overhand with a hard ball, like pitching a baseball. When I felt ready, I looked at Minn. He gave me a friendly smile and said, "So ready to be devastated, rookie?" I said, "It's not very often that I'm devastated in a game that involves a ball, but I think Dirtball's learning curve just might change that." Minn said, "Okay, let's do it. And I should mention that there's some intelligence built into this dome. It allows you to redo a panel if you want, but it won't let you skip one. It also gives a warning sound when either of us reaches 30 of the 35 panels. On your mark, get set, go." Well, okay. After making it through the first 5 panels that I'd already practiced, I was flummoxed in finding the next panels to aim at. Fortunately, Minn saw my problem and said, "Hey, rookie, let's stop. I'll reset the game so the dome flashes the next panel in your sequence. It'll level the playing field a bit." That did help a lot, but hitting the panels on top of the dome was still tricky. Looking up and intensively using my left hand was tiring, and I often collided with Minn while rushing for my next shot. You know, I might look like a pro in baseball, but I know I look like a real rookie in Dirtball. I tried to knock Minn's sticky ball off 3 times, but I succeeded only once. Minn never attacked mine. He didn't need to. I was working on panel 11 when I heard a bright buzzing tone that announced he had reached panel 30. The game was over about 3 minutes later, and I was left breathing hard and feeling bruised from tangling my feet and falling several times. Well, Minn put his flexible plastic-like arm around my shoulder and said, "You might not think so, but you made a good start. This game takes a while to get used to. You'll get there. I can see. I can see you'll be a tough competitor. Remember that I have an unfair advantage because I built the game and I've played it hundreds of times." Chapter 2: The Backstory. At the time I met Minn, our family had moved to Cortina d'Ampezzo in the Dolomites region of Italy. It was because Pops was researching prehistoric extraterrestrial visits. Cortina was a cool place to live because of its history, its opportunities for hiking, these remote mountain refuges, and skiing. Another good thing was the local kids were oriented toward outdoors and sports, mainly cycling, soccer, and skiing. I had been able to interest a few in playing baseball, but not enough to form a team, never mind form a little league. The north end of our neighborhood sports field was under construction, and giant bulldozers had plowed out a hole that would be used for a new grandstand. It was a little scary to have these beastly machines sitting above us on dirt hillsides, looking down at us as we played. Those dozers were especially big because Cortina had many huge construction projects going because they were preparing for hosting the 2026 Olympics. Despite the dirt mounds and bulldozers, the sports field grass was intact, and one day, a Saturday I think, Leo, Pops, and I kick soccer balls around, and then practice baseball. When Leo and Pops left for home and had lunch, I stayed behind. For me, the choice was easy. What's more important, eating or baseball? Since there was no longer anybody to pitch to, I was throwing balls into the air and whacking them with a bat. Then I felt a breeze. I looked around, and an unusual person appeared as if from nowhere. The unusual person walked straight at me. I was uncomfortable at first. I wasn't sure if it was human. It came closer, and its slightly triangular face proved it was not human. It was about my size with two deep-set dark eyes, a round mouth, and two ears, kind of similar to a flat radar dish or something, and they were right on the side of its head, like humans, I suppose. It had no visible hair, and from that I conjectured it was a he rather than a she. He looked like a human with a totally smooth torso, legs, and arms, with no bone joints like you see in humans' elbows and knees. His movements were fluid. His tan skin seemed exactly like humans, and he wore a single piece of clothing from his feet to his neck. It was made from a tightly woven fabric, the same color as his skin. I noticed six-fingered hands on him, but I couldn't tell if he had toes underneath his covered feet. Overall, hey, he looked just like a pleasant human might look if he were made from plastic. The unusual being stopped about 2 meters from me and introduced himself in English with an American accent. I am Minn, and I have only recently arrived on your planet. I'm exploring this planet and mean no harm to anybody. With whom do I have the pleasure of speaking? You can imagine, I was blown away and probably looked about as intelligent as a fence post. If Minn had teeth, I didn't see them, even though his roundish mouth and his expression changed a lot when he spoke. After a second, I awkwardly blurted out, My name is Rookie, and I live nearby. Where do you come from? Minn's eyes changed to the shape of like vertical ovals, making me notice he didn't have eyebrows. He nodded in acknowledgement of my answer and said, Rookie, I have just arrived in a small craft hosted by a nearby larger ship that my family takes when we travel between planets. We are currently cruising the solar system, something we have done many times. We inhabit the planet closest to you. You Earthlings know it as Venus. You named it after your ancient Roman goddess of beauty. And I'll tell you, that amuses us because while our planet may appear beautiful at a distance, its clouded atmosphere is terribly hot and it contains sulfuric acid. Minn's mouth curled up at its corners, and at the same time, in the area just below and to the outside of his cheeks that we would call cheeks, his skin tone changed to a warm orange-brown color. When I saw that, I was certain he was friendly. Hey, I also guessed we just might become friends. Minn said, Oh, and another amusing thing. I learned only on this visit that Earth scientists have just detected the gas called phosphine in our atmosphere. He shook his head and smiled his orange-brown smile. That discovery led some scientists to conclude our planet may support primitive life. Your scientists couldn't possibly know this, but phosphine is present in our atmosphere only because we keep pets. Earthlings call their most friendly lower order animals dogs, while we call ours pals. Unfortunately, our pals often don't properly digest their food, and that produces phosphine. I smiled when I heard that. And Min said, "Yes, Rookie, without knowing it, your famous scientist's great discovery is that our pets fart a lot." Now, just in case you relate my words to some of your scientists and they refuse to believe that phosphine comes from our pets, you can assure them that what you call Venus does support primitive life. I hereby present myself to you, Rookie, as walking, talking proof of that primitive life. Take a photo now. Hey, gosh, I would have done just that, but unfortunately, I didn't have a camera with me. And Min continued, "As you might imagine, we do not call our planet Venus. We call it Dirt. Sometimes we're wistful when we say the name because we haven't been able to actually live on dirt for many generations. Years and years ago, Dirt's surface became too hot for life, forcing us to build communities in the outer, least hot layer of our atmospheric clouds. If we had not been a civilization of technologists, hey, I wouldn't even be here." Hey, but then I said, "My father is an astronomer and will be interested to hear and learn about you and Dirt. He uses powerful telescopes to survey the solar system, but gee, he's never mentioned signs of life on Dirt or ever having observed your spacecraft. Did he just not look in the right place at the right time?" Min replied, "Oh, that's not why. It's because our vehicles use super stealth technology. Light can't reflect from them, and they don't give off a heat signature. We use other technologies that hide our presence. For example, when my family surveyed Earth 3 years ago, I descended to the surface and made detailed observations while wearing an invisibility cloak. I did it for weeks. That's how I learned English. And today, before I left my parents' ship, I covered my vehicle with an invisibility cloak and put one on myself. But when I saw you playing games with balls, I wanted to meet you, and I wanted to play ball with you, so I took it off." Well, I thought, this guy might be from Venus, but he's my kind of guy. I was comfortable with him now and jumped right into telling him about baseball and all its rules. Then we practiced hitting, throwing, and fielding. Boy, Min was a natural. His throwing motion was fluid. His fastball was the same as mine, maybe even faster. He was a quick moving fielder, never missed a ground ball, and hit the ball quite well for a newbie. We changed to kicking around a soccer ball, but it didn't interest him as much as baseball. Perhaps that's because it was my attitude driving the situation. Min was a natural athlete. He was well coordinated, learned fast, and when we took a break, then he invited me to play Dirtball. Chapter 3, The Beastie Boys. I did much better in our second game of Dirtball, but still got beat badly. Min ran me ragged, and when we finished, I suggested we go outside and take a break. We sat leaning our backs against the dome, and I asked Min about life on Dirt. He told me that even though untold generations had been born since Dirt's surface had become uninhabitable, his people were still sad for having departed, and they longed to descend back to their homeland, and they ached to return to it. He said his people were peaceful and supported each other, perhaps because they had all lost their homes at the same time, and they felt like an extended family. They lived in an environment that simulated the nature, weather, and seasons that the ancients had known when they could live down on the surface of dirt. Yet in reality, they were on two huge connected space stations. I had just asked if his people would ever consider relocating from dirt to Earth when two nasty big kids I knew appeared on top of one of the dirt mounds on the far end of the sports field. Soon they started shouting and waving their fists in the air. Oh, ugh, I thought, not them. Leo protects me from those thugs at school, but I guess they bully people 24/7. I hoped they'd go hassle somebody else, but no such luck. Their shouts grew into curses. Curses! And I saw them each pick up rocks from the dirt mound. They looked around as if to make sure nobody was watching, and they charged down the field toward us, hollering we had no right to put up a dome on the field. They shouted we'd better get ready because they were going to trash the dome and trash us. As they came closer, they started calling Minn a weirdo and saying they were going to kick his butt. I looked at Minn and tried to figure out what to do. He didn't have an idea either. They came closer and closer. All I could think was, we're going to have to fight, and I hope they don't hit us with those rocks. Then Minn sprinted backward, disappeared for a few seconds, and returned with 2 sticky balls without tethers. He also carried a container and poured its contents over the balls. He handed one to me, saying, I'm prepared to remove the dome if that's what your laws say. But if those 2 wild people don't stop and act civilly toward us, I'll toss this little action stopper ball at the hair of the one on the right, and you take the one on the left. I've juiced up the stickiness, and that'll take their minds off of us. Well, I shouted at the 2 bullies to stop and talk, but they growled and they gritted their teeth and they shouted, You 2 weirdos are going to get what you deserve. Good grief. We held off to the last possible second, hoping to avoid a fight, but when the Beastie Boys stopped 2 meters in front of us and wound up to throw their rocks at us, Minn and I fired our sticky balls at the same time. With their hands full of rocks, they couldn't very well block our balls. Ha! And we had a pair of bullseyes. The one Minn hit did get off one of his rocks, but it didn't reach us. He dropped the other rock and tried to push the sticky ball off his head. The bully in front of me dropped all his rocks and went into a frenzy as if 1,000 mosquitoes were attacking his head. Each yelled to the other for help, and Minn's guy tried to help his friend by arcing his right arm around the sticky ball and yanking it. Well, that pulled the guy's hair and made him cry out, but the ball stuck firmly, and now the second guy's arm was stuck awkwardly to his friend's head. They howled and threatened to murder us while we just stood and watched. The one I'd hit, he yelled, We're going to stop you, weirdos. He tried to move toward us, but the second bully was hanging on him, and his feet were dangling above the ground. This duo was stuck together and could barely move. I knew I was risking my future life, but I couldn't help getting in a dig. Hey, Minn, I said. There are a lot of weirdos here. Let's split and find a place where normal people can hang out. All right, yep, just as you would imagine. They called out more curses, but they eventually ran out of gas. The bully I'd hit collapsed on his knees and rolled on his side, and the second one just came falling heavily on top of him. What a mess they were. Their final curse was, You'll pay for this. You're so stupid. Just wait. Chapter 4. The Big Beasts. As Minn and I watched them struggle back to the far end of the field, I couldn't shake thoughts of the beating the thugs would give me the next time Leo wasn't around to protect me. Minn had other things on his mind, though, because he said, As I told you earlier, Rookie, dirt people are peaceful. Our code is to avoid conflict and, most importantly, avoid causing conflict. Everyone is free to defend himself when needed, but withdrawing from tense situations is always considered desirable and honorable. I'm afraid I should go now, and I'm sorry for any trouble that may later fall to you. Whew, I was kind of deflated. I said, Thanks for your concern, Minn. Don't worry, those 2 guys were way out of line. They deserve what they got, and I'm not afraid of dealing with them in the future. But boy, I hate to forego another game of Dirtball because of them. But I know it's sensible. I'll help you pack up. Then we heard starter motors and the roar of bulldozer engines coming to life. The bullies had reached the parking lot. Now their fathers were roaring off the dirt mounds on two bulldozers. They raised the massive plow blades a few centimeters off the ground and started speeding across the field toward us and toward the dome. Those machines were huge. Seated in the operators' cabs, the drivers were protected by windscreens, and they appeared unstoppable. They could run over us, wreck the dome, and plow into Minn's invisible ship. They tore up the ball field as they roared toward us. Minn said, I can't understand such unprovoked anger or these people's apparent love of violence. I have frighteningly powerful weapons residing just there in my ship. They're for use in emergency, but I prefer to handle this situation differently. He picked up one of the solid balls, removed its tether, handed it to me, took the other for himself, and said, You were throwing a baseball to your father before I made myself visible, and I saw your curveball. I plan to wait until our next dirtball game to show you how these hard balls can curve sharply. But forget that plan. You're going to have a high-stakes curveball trial by fire in about 60 seconds. Just grip it. Grip it like when you were playing dirtball and use your baseball curving motion. It'll curve more quickly and dramatically than you've ever seen. Watch for any change in the bulldozer's speed or direction and curve it around the windscreen and into the cab's window. Hey, you'll see. This ball will almost change directions and it'll hook right in. Remember, you only have one chance. The dozers barreled closer and closer. I tensed up. They were so huge, and their engines roared so loudly as they bore down us that I almost froze. These crazy people appeared intent on smashing us through the dome and running over us. I turned and said to Minn, Hey, remember, you can change your mind and grab your emergency weapons. Like right now? Ha, he said. You won't become roadkill. You and I can handle this. Trust yourself. Visualize arcing your curve tightly around the windscreen. We'll knock those crazy drivers out of their seats and off their dozers. Then jump on board, turn the steering wheel away from the dome, and switch off the ignition key. The dozer will stop. I got to tell you, folks, I loved Minn's confidence, but those huge bulldozers kept coming. Their roar rattled through my bones. Their tracks chewed up the playing field and made mud fly. We walked toward them to give ourselves more time to turn the dozers before they hit the dome. Then we stood firm. The bulldozers didn't stop. They didn't slow. They roared on. We held our ground, and when they were merely 5 meters from us, the time for action had come. We fired our curveballs, and yes, each was a perfect strike. Both drivers were knocked clean off the dozers. Both dozers veered away because his driver had been holding the steering wheel as he flew off. The dozers wouldn't hit us or the dome now. But those mechanical beasts, now they roared side by side toward the street. We ran at an angle to intercept them, and I was approaching mine when I saw its steel track links circling at high speed. I could never jump up on the track to enter the cab as I'd imagined doing. I'd be broken to bits. I turned to check how Minn was faring and saw his plastic-like legs spring him into the air and onto his dozer's engine cover. He was already pulling himself into the cab. But what could I do? I didn't have anything like that jumping power. I started to lose hope. In only moments, I could be responsible for a disastrous crash on the street in front of us. Or the dozer could cross the street and smash through a house. My hopes fell. My speed dropped, and now I lagged behind the dozer. But there, from behind, I could see the solution I needed. I put everything I had into a burst of speed, caught up to the back of the dozer, leaped and grabbed the base of its open rear window. I pulled myself in, wriggled into the driver's seat, found the key, and turned it off. Whew. The dozer stopped with its blade over the sidewalk. I was scraped, bruised, exhausted, and I was shaking at the thought of what could have happened. Cars zoomed up and down the street, oblivious to the disaster that didn't play out. I sat in the dozer seat like a statue. I was totally depleted. Chapter 5, Balls Bounce. So that's my short story. I walked back to Minn and we both watched the two bulldozer dads limp back toward the far end of the field. We picked up the two balls that had beamed them and faced each other in front of the dome. We liked each other. We'd been through a lot together in a short time, but we both knew our time together was over. Minn quietly said he needed to rendezvous with his parents' ship, and I said I needed to get home for dinner. He said, "It sure would be great to keep in touch." But we both shrugged, knowing that there was no internet between Earth and dirt. The thought of never seeing Minn again was hard. I'd never before met anyone who liked playing games as much as I do, and like me, liked inventing games too. And Minn had shown the courage of a blue marble defender. He would have been a great teammate, but we knew our paths were destined to diverge. Minn nodded sadly and said he'd look for me whenever he returned to further explore Earth, but we both knew he was just trying to ease the pain. Minn touched the side of the dome's doors with both hands, and it folded itself neatly with the same clacking sounds as when he first opened it. As I helped him pull the bag around it, I complimented him on inventing the Dirtball game and the dome, and said he'd inspired me to create more new games. When he stood, I smacked a high five against his high six. We exchanged smiles, and then, without discussion, we exchanged gifts. He made a flourish of presenting me one of each of the dirt balls and adding new red tethers to them. I handed him my baseball and my prized bat. That brought a big orange-brown smile to his cheeks, and he stepped aside and took a practice swing. I thought also about giving him the Ted Williams baseball card I carried around in my wallet, but I decided it really wouldn't mean anything to him. He walked away holding the baseball, the bat, and his dome bag. Then he just disappeared into thin air, leaving me feeling sad and ready to cry. He was now invisible behind his ship's cloak, and for a moment I felt a sudden little breeze that made me know he was gone. From now on, he would only be a memory, and that left me feeling empty and down. But then, whoa! A 2-meter high letter R, a capital letter R, made of red smoke puffballs appeared in the sky. And that did it. It all came out, and I blubbered like a baby as I walked along toward home, holding a ball and a tether in each hand. Hey, look, it's not often you make a friend, especially one who likes to play ball. Too bad. Too bad. Too bad Minn had to go back to dirt. When I neared home, my right hand became tired from holding the heavier, smooth ball. As I swished it for the lighter, sticky ball, a question occurred to me. Why did Minn attach those red tethers when my blue ones were right there? Why? The end.